Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're all doing really well out there today. So a little while back, I put out a video giving an overview of OpenMediaVault 8, what's new, what changed from OMV 7, and whether it's worth upgrading to. And if you haven't seen that one yet, I'll link to it in the description of this video. It's actually a pretty good watch before diving into this project. So today we're kicking off the actual hands-on series of OpenMediaVault 8. And this is video 1, and we're going to do a full install of OMV 8 and get file sharing up and running. But this is just the start. Over the course of this series, we're going to set up multi-user access for your household, PC and phone backups, getting Docker running on your NAS, spinning up a media server and some other useful apps, and setting up remote access so you can get to your stuff from anywhere. Real quick, this section is brought to you by Private Alps. They've been running Swiss-based cloud infrastructure since 2019, and if you care about where your data lives and who has access to it, they're worth knowing about. As I mentioned, Private Alps is a Swiss hosting provider that's been running since 2019, and I mean actually running it themselves. Their own hardware, their own IP space, their own data center in Switzerland. No reselling, no third-party infrastructure underneath. The things that stood out to me is no KYC, no logs, and zero trust setup where even their own staff can't access client data. That's not marketing language. That's just how the platform is designed. So if you're running anything sensitive, whether it's a personal project, a business workload, or you just don't want your activity being tracked, that architecture matters. And they've got the full range. VPS starting around 12 euros a month, dedicated servers, GPU servers for heavier compute, VPN, web hosting, and even Tor hidden hosting if that's relevant to your use case. Payments are flexible too with crypto, bank transfer, Apple Pay, and credit card. If you want to check it out, my referral link is in the video description, and new signups get 10% off all Private Alps services and 15% off the bare metal dedicated server range specifically. So links below, but back to the video. Each video will build on the last one. So if you want to follow along start to finish, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the videos in this series. But for this video specifically, here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk you through the process of creating a bootable USB drive. And yes, I can already hear the comments. Just use Ventoy. I know Ventoy exists. If you want a dedicated video on Ventoy badly enough, I guess let me know in the comment section and I guess I'll make one. But today we're going to do it the old-fashioned way and it's going to be fine, I promise. After that, I'll introduce the hardware that we're installing on today, and then we're going to go through the full OMV 8 installation step by step. And by the end, you'll have a working NAS, not just an operating system, but an actual working NAS with a shared folder that you can access from other machines. So let's get into it. So as I mentioned, we're going to start this off by creating a bootable USB drive. And for this, I'm just going to use this little SanDisk USB drive. It's 64 gigs. It's more than enough for what we're doing. Again, I'm aware of Ventoy, but for right now, we're going to keep things simple and create our bootable USB with this. But before we do that, we need to go to OpenMediaVault's website. As we can see here, it's openmediavault.org. You can read about this if you'd like, but this is just a great basic NAS software that I've been using off and on since I started this channel. So what we're going to do is come over to the download page, and here we've got some different options as far as what we can download. Of course, to keep things simple, I'm just going to click on stable, this get the latest stable version button. That's going to bring us over to here, and I understand why they use third-party services like SourceForge. I just hate going to third-party sites to download things. So we're going to give this a second to do its thing. It's 1.2 gigs, and this is actually going pretty quickly. So while we're waiting on this, I have already plugged in my USB drive into my device so that we can move on to the next step when this is done. And it looks like it is done right there. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize our browser window here. And then I'm going to open up Beelink Edger. You can use any app you want. I've just been using Beelink for a long time. So that's what I'm going to use from here or for here right now. So I'm going to flash from file. Right here is our OpenMediaVault 807. At least that's what we've got at the time of recording this video. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to click open. I'm going to click select target next. And right here is that SanDisk drive. It says 61.5 gigs, but that's because of compression and overhead, all of the nonsense that goes along with file systems. So I'm going to go ahead and select that and click select one. And then I'll click Flash. And if you're not familiar with Beelink or these other apps, I'll try to have a couple of them linked in the video description so you can figure out which one you like better when you decide to go down the path like this. Okay, so just like that, we've created our bootable media. I'm going to go ahead and close the application here. I'm going to close this little window down there. And just for the sake of it, I'm going to come over to here and I'm going to say eject. Probably don't need to, but you know, why not? Now I can go ahead and remove the USB device. Got right there, and we move over to hardware now. Okay, so for hardware, what we're going to use for this setup anyway, there we go, is the Beelink ME Pro. I've reviewed this in previous videos, so if you want more information about this device, definitely go check that out. I'll have that linked in the video description. This is a great little device. It works perfectly for a NAS. On the back, if we flip it over right there, we can pull this tab right there. We've got two 8TB hard drives in here. You don't necessarily need that much storage, but it's always better to have more storage than you'll probably need, at least for a while. And I will be running this in RAID. So while we've got 16 terabytes here, eventually we're just going to have 8, but we'll have a little bit of failover just in case one of them dies. We shouldn't lose any data. Also, if we flip this over the other way, we've got 3 drives in here as well. Oops, there we go. Let's do that. So all 3 of these are each 1 terabyte NVMe drives. One of them is going to be for the operating system. The other 2 will be for some other storage that we'll get into later on in the series. But when you decide to build your OpenMediaVault setup, make sure you've got at least 1 drive for the operating system and at least 1 drive for storage. If you want to do something like RAID or something like that, make sure you have at least 2 drives that are the same size. So that kind of covers what I wanted to talk about here with regards to the hardware. What I'm going to do is actually get it set up behind me with a KVM so I can access it remotely, and we'll go ahead and get started on the installation process. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the device right there. That's the Beelink ME Pro. I've got the USB thumb drive that we just created plugged into that, as well as the stuff for the KVM. Again, that's just something so that I can access everything from over here on my desktop rather than having to do everything plugged in directly to that. It just makes it easier for me to do this and record what I'm doing to share with you guys. But you can just plug directly in mouse, keyboard, and monitor into your device when you're ready to do that. So now that we've got our tiny pilot set up, again, just to make it easier to record everything, what I'm going to do is come over to here and I'm going to press the power button and got that lit up. And then here in a second, we should see that, oops. And then I'm just going to start pressing delete, just so that we can hopefully get into the BIOS and make whatever changes we need to make so that the device will first boot from the USB that we created a moment ago. Cool. So this is the BIOS for that device. Let me go ahead. Let me move, oops, come here, there we go. Let's move you over there like that, there we go. So what I wanna do is actually come over to the boot option here. And our first boot device is the USB, which is that's the thing that we want, is the USB to be number 1. So we'll always try to boot from the USB device first. And then from there, we've got another device on there that we'll try to boot from as well. We may have to change this later, but for right now, all of this looks fine. If, however, you needed to change things, you can use the instructions that are over here on the page to configure things the way you need it done. So what I'm going to do is click on Save and Exit, and just out of an abundance of caution, what I'm going to do is just scroll down to where it says UEFI, USB, and click Enter. Cool, couple of beeps. Yours may or may not make the beeps that you may or may not have heard. We've got a couple of options here. I apologize if that's kind of hard to read. I don't really get a lot of option to control the resolution here, but it says install in advanced options. I want to install, so I'm going to click that. And then it's going to ask us things about like what language do we want. By default, it says English. That's what I'm going to use, so I'll just click Enter. Now it's going to ask me for a time zone selection here. And again, I'm in the United States, so that's what I'm going to select. Of course, you'll make any of your choices based on your location. So I'm going to click that. Again, the key map to use for me will be American English. That's the very first option there. But again, change this to what you need. So at this point, it's just loading additional components as it says, and you can see some of the things that were kind of flying by there real quick as far as the things that it was loading so that we can start this installation process. So now it's detecting our network device. In this case, it's looking at a couple of different devices there. Man, and I don't remember which one I want to use. I'm gonna go with the Realtek just because I feel like it's a bit more universally easier to use, I guess. That said, I do want to actually plug in both of my devices because I'm not sure if both of them are currently plugged in. Okay, so now both of my Ethernet devices are plugged in on the Beelink. So I'm going to go ahead and again use the Realtek, but you can use whatever you've got available for your setup. And at this point, it's configuring the network that we just told it to use. So it's configured the network with a DHCP, which is very standard. So now it's asking for a host name. Now, this is something that you could use to type into your browser, right? So by default, it says OpenMediaVault. Again, I understand that may be a little bit difficult to read, but it does say OpenMediaVault there. I'm just gonna add 8 to that, which should be there. There we go. So the host name will be OpenMediaVault 8. Again, that's just a differentiator for me to make it easier later on. I'll go ahead and click enter. And then the domain name, which always threw me initially, right now it just says internal. What it's asking for here with the domain name is, do you want it to be OpenMediaVault8.internal? I like to use local here. So I'm going to change the domain name to local. So that in the browser, I should be able to go to OpenMediaVault8.local and access the dashboard when it's available. Just know that the domain name isn't, mysite.com. It is literally just the extension that we will use to access this on our local network. It's a little confusing. I don't know why they put it that way, but it is what it is. Go ahead and click enter. Now it's going to ask for a root password. So go ahead and enter a root password here that you'll use to do root access things. And I'll click enter, and then it's going to ask me to do that again. It's always bothered me that this screen and the previous screen are both the password screen, but they're laid out differently, and I don't know why. Anyway, we're going to enter the same password that we just entered a moment ago, and click enter. Now it's going to ask us what time zone we're in. This will look different depending on which region you told the system you were in earlier. I am in Mountain, so that's what I'm going to select. Okay, so here it says more than one storage device has been detected, and that's good because there are 5 of them in there. You may not have that many, but I do. So that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to click continue. Now it's going to say, hey, which drive do you want to use? It's kind of figuring out what our options are at the moment. So, okay, I was wrong. It is a 500 gig drive, 2 1 terabyte drives, and 2 8 terabyte drives. Now, I thought that might have been the case as we were doing the boot up in the BIOS or the UEFI. It said Debian 500 something, and I thought that might be the case. So I'm actually going to use the 500 gig drive for the operating system, and that way we can have a pair of 1 terabytes and a pair of 8 terabyte drives to use later. So I'm going to go ahead and select the 500 gig drive and press enter. So now it's going to go ahead and partition that drive and create the file systems that it needs to install OpenMediaVault on that 500 gig drive. At this point, it's just going to kind of do its thing for a while, and we can hang out and wait for it to ask us the next thing it needs to know. Okay, so it says installation complete there. It says installation is complete, so it's time to boot into your new system. Make sure to remove the installation media. That's the little USB plug or the USB drive that we plugged in a moment ago, so that you can boot into your new system rather than restarting the installation. Please choose continue to reboot. So I'm going to click continue. I'm going to get up and pull that drive, and then everything should reboot, and we should be able to jump into our operating system via the browser. Okay, so it's rebooted. I've removed the USB drive. We're just going to make sure that this boot goes the way we want it to. This looks good. It does say Debian. Let's go ahead and click go and make sure that everything worked the way we wanted it to. Okay, so there it says OpenMediaVault 8 login. I know, again, that's hard. That was weird. We've got an IP address here of 192.168.0.113, or again, we can use the OpenMediaVault 8.local to get there. So what I'm going to do is minimize this. I'm going to type in OpenMediaVault 8.local. Hey, look, there we go. Again, we can also do 192.168.0.113. Like there. And again, those are the same thing, just 2 different ways to access it. So I think for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to go ahead and use the .local address here. Now to get logged in, we can do admin, and then the password is OpenMediaVault. And there we go. We are logged in to our new system for the first time. Now, the first thing I want to do here is, if you want to support them, definitely do that. You can click donate there. I'm going to close that. And it says, hey, the dashboard hasn't been configured yet, so let's do that. We're going to click the settings page, and then there's all of these different things here that we can select for our homepage dashboard. I like CPU and utilization. Really, really all of this. I don't really want that. Load average is fine. Memory is good. Network interfaces. We can do grids or tables or both. Let's do grids on both of those. Those are in different, that says table then grid, and that says grid then table. Just little inconsistencies. Smart, I like having smart turned on so that we can get a status of the drives that we have that have smart enabled on them. Services that are running, again, table or grid. I guess we're just going to go grid on everything for continuity or whatever. System information displays various system information. Cool. System time, updates available, display the system uptime. Sure. All of that will now be available if we click save. Give this a moment. It may just take it a moment to do the CPU and CPU utilization. Interesting. I'm not sure why the CPU isn't popping through there. But we can see our utilization here. Currently, it was at 31%, and now it's come down. We can see that we've got 3 network interfaces on here. By default, we're just using this one. And there's also a wireless option as well if you wanted to go that route. Smart status, no monitor devices. We haven't done anything with storage yet, and that's probably why that's not there. We can see the drive temperatures. We can see services that are running, system information, file systems. Again, we haven't done anything with storage, so that's why that's not there. Load average, pretty minimal here. System time, updates available, uptime 2 minutes, and then memory. This device does only have 12 gigs of memory on it, so that's why you're seeing kind of an odd number there. Let's go ahead and click on updates available first. And there are a bunch of them. There are 63 updates. So to install those, what we're going to do is just click install packages. And it says, hey, all packages will be upgraded. Do you want to proceed? Confirm, and yes. And now it'll go through this process of installing everything, and it may ask us to reboot, but we'll get to that when we get there. Okay, and when it says end of line, that's how you know that everything has been done that it needs to do. So we can go ahead and click on close. And then what we need to do next is click apply. This is always going to be a multi-step process. Anytime we make any changes, we'll have to apply it and then save it pretty much with everything we do in OpenMediaVault. So we're going to go ahead and click yes. See, all right. System reboot required. Okay, let's go ahead and just do that real quick. Let's go ahead and do this. We're going to click here. We're going to click reboot, and then we're going to say confirm, and then yes. Again, everything, we have to confirm basically everything we do. So I'm going to go ahead and click on yes, and we're going to go ahead and let this reboot like it's doing now. Okay, so here we are a couple of moments later. The system has rebooted, and now we have to log back in. Again, username is admin, password is OpenMediaVault. And speaking of that, now that we have done the updates that we need to do, let's actually go in and see about changing our password, because I think that's really important. You should always change the default password with any time you're working with an operating system. Never use the default password. So let's click change password, new password, and then we'll click save. And there we go. So now we have run all of our updates, and we've changed our user password. The next thing that I think we want to do here is go over to storage and take a look at our disks. And again, we've got our 500 gig disk. This is our boot drive. We've got 2 NVMe drives, and we've got 2 hard drives. That's great. That's what we wanted to see here. So let's go back to storage and create a file system. So what we're going to do is create and mount a file system. You can use whatever you want. I'm a big fan of ext4 for this kind of thing. I know a lot of people like the Btrfs. I've heard recently that some people are using XFS for certain things. But again, I'm going to use ext4 just because I've had a lot of good success with it. Well, this was bound to happen at some point. So let's go back to our storage. Let's go to our disks. Let's select our disk and wipe it first. We'll click confirm and click yes, and then we're just gonna do a quick wipe on this. Again, there's no real data on here that I'm gonna miss, so there's that. So we'll click close. We'll do the same thing over here. We're gonna wipe this and click confirm and say yes, and quick. This should also, again, go quickly, and then we see our end of line. So I'll click close. Now we can go back to storage, file systems. Now let's see if it will let us. There we go. So we just needed to select or wipe the drives first. So what we're going to find out here is that we can only create a file system with one drive at a time going this route. And again, if you've only got one drive for your storage, this is fine. You can click that and click save, and then it will create the file system that you need so you can start creating shares. But because of the system that I've currently got with two pairs of drives, what I want to do is actually set these up in RAID. So what we need to do is actually come over to System. Oops, yeah, that's fine. We're going to discard that. We're going to go to Plugins, and then we're going to type in RAID. Oops, we're gonna spell it right though, and we're going to click here, and we're going to go ahead and install RAID. Click confirm, and then yes, and then we'll click close. Now I'm also curious. One other thing I wanted to look at real quick here for plugins is to see if ZFS, okay, ZFS isn't an option. I was just curious. So now let's go over and take a look at storage. Multiple device, I think, is what we're going to be looking for here. We're going to create. So we've got different types of RAIDs here that we can use. If we're not sure which one we want to use, we can do types of RAID, right? And here we can see what we've got available to us. And we can see that certain types of RAID require a certain number of drives. So RAID 0 with striping splits data across 2 disks. It offers maximum performance and capacity, but no fault errors. If one disk fails, all is lost. Or there's RAID 1, which writes identical data to 2 disks, provides high data safety and faster read speeds, but limits storage to 50% of the total capacity. And that's kind of what I talked about earlier when we were looking at the device, that though we've got 16 terabytes of hard drives available to us, we're really going to have 8 by the time we're done. There's RAID 5, but that requires more disks, and then it gets more complicated from there. So what we're going to do is we're going to use RAID 1 or mirroring for this. So we're going to come back to here. We're going to select this. We're going to go to mirror, which is what we just talked about. That is RAID 1. And then we're going to select our 2 devices, and then we'll click save. And here we go. Now, oops, there we go. Now it has created that. It's clean. It's resyncing. It's going through its process. What we're going to do is, again, it says pending configuration changes. So I'm going to go ahead and click apply there, and we'll say yes. Okay, so that part is done. But as we can see here, it looks like it's going to take about 11 hours to get through this resyncing process, 10 to 11 hours, depending on how things go. So it may take a while for your system to fully build up the RAID, just like it's going to take this system a little while as well. But instead of wasting 10 or 11 hours waiting on this, I think what we want to do next is actually go ahead and jump in to our file systems that we looked at a little while ago. What we're going to do is come over here to where it says File Systems, and then we're going to go ahead and click on Plus. Again, I'm going to use an ext4 because I've had good luck with it and I like it. So I'm going to click ext4. And then I'm going to select the device. This is a software RAID that shows us how much storage that we've got available here. It shows us our mount point. It shows us which RAID we're using, and again, how much storage. So I'm going to select that, click save. And then we're going to give this a little while to do its thing as well, because it's got to go through and build up this file system for us. So we're just going to hang out and wait. Okay, so here we are about 20 minutes later, just shy of 20 minutes later, and it says end of line. So our file system has now, in theory, at least been created. So we can click close. We're going to select our file system, which is going to be the 7 terabyte system that we just created. We want to get warnings at some point to let us know that we're running out of storage space. 85% is kind of the default of when that happens. And then if we want to, we can add tags to this for organization if you're into that sort of thing. I am not, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on Save. Cool. So now it says that we've got all of this, but again, we have to apply our pending configuration changes. We're going to click apply. We're going to say yes, and we'll give this just a moment as well. There's a lot of waiting when you're setting up storage, but that's pretty true across the board with almost every storage system you might be interested in using. Okay, so our configuration has been set. We can see that we've got 7.22 terabytes, or TB bytes, I guess. We've got a little bit of storage being used there for, again, overhead file system stuff, that sort of thing. Not a big deal. Now, the next thing I want to bring up is earlier I'd mentioned that it's usually kind of bad practice to use or leave the default username and password as the default username and password. At the very minimum, change the password. Now, when we get into doing stuff with file access and that sort of thing, I think it's better to have an admin account to manage the system, and then a separate user account for for your files and that sort of thing for the NAS operating portion of things. So we'll have our admin account that is how we will administer our system. But then I'm also going to set up a separate user account for me. I'm going to set it up as DB Tech, and that way we can kind of keep those things separated so that if something does get compromised on my computer, it's less likely to affect the ability to compromise this system as well. So I'm now going to go over and create a new user account for myself. But before we get into the point where we create individual user accounts for myself or whoever else might be using our NAS solution, the first thing we need to do is create a shared folder. So what I'm going to do is come over here to shared folders. I'm going to create a shared folder. I'm going to call this, I'm going to call it Home DIR, again, just so that I know what it is when I'm dealing with things later on. You can name this whatever you'd like to name it, though. This is primarily going to be just for that, like I said, home directory stuff, but we're going to cover that in a moment when we get into the user creation section of things. What I want to do now is select our file system that we just created. The relative path will be here, and then the permissions, you can kind of set this up how you'd like to. However, if you wanted to just leave things open and easy, you could say everyone can read and write, or you can just use the default selection here. However, if you have some tighter security requirements that you'd like to use, you can select whichever option here makes the most sense. Here we're going to have administrator read and write, users read and write, others will be read only, so they won't be able to do anything without permission. So this is what I'm going to set up for the home directory folder, and I'm going to click save. So now we've got that. Now, of course, what I want to do next is click apply, just like we do every step of the way, that multi-step applying of settings. So now what we want to do is go ahead and go over and create a new user. So I'm going to click users. What I want to do here first, though, is go to settings, and I want to enable a home directory. It just makes things easier. When you create new users, it will automatically set up a home directory for them that they can just drop their stuff into and manage that way. So what I want to do is select location. Right here it says none. I want to select home dir because that's why I created it. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to click save. It's probably going to ask us to confirm that yet again. We're going to go ahead and click save, and yes, cool. So now we can go back up here to user management, and we can click on users. Now, by default, the admin user isn't listed in here, and that's fine. What I want to do, though, is create a new user. I'm going to click create. If you've got a way to import, you can do that. We're just going to start from scratch here. We're going to click create. My name will be DB Tech, my email address, my password, and confirming it. The shell, you can use whichever version of shell you want that user to have access to, or none at all if you want to go that route. I don't know why that just popped up. And then if you wanted to set up user groups, you could absolutely do that as well. I don't think for the time being I need to set this user up as in any of these groups, but that may change as we go through this setup process in future videos. So be prepared to come back to this setting page later on as we need to. I'm not going to import any public keys or anything like that because we're keeping things basic here, but if you'd like to add SSH public keys, you can do that as well. And you can also disallow account modification. This disallows the user to modify their own account. That depends on your setup as well. I'm going to leave all of this as it currently stands now and click Save. Again, it's going to ask us to confirm. Say yes. And there we go. Okay, so now that we've created our new user, the next thing we need to do is actually enable something like SMB CIFS, and that's just a Samba share solution so that we can remotely access the folder that we just created with our new user account. So if we come back over to our dashboard here, we can go to Services, and here we can see NFS, rsync, SMB/CIFS, and SSH. By default, SSH is turned on. We may use one of these others later, but for right now, what I want to do is enable SMB/CIFS. So let's go to Settings, and let's enable this. You can change your workgroup to something else if you've got a workgroup set up on your network. You could set this up as a time server as well, but we're not going to do that. We do want to enable home directories like we talked about earlier. Browsable, absolutely. If we want to inherit ACLs, we can do that. We can inherit permissions. We can enable a recycle bin. I think that's usually a pretty good one. We can follow symlinks, allow following symbolic links in the home directories. If you want to go that route, you can do that. I don't want to get into all of the details about what all of this stuff does. It does a pretty good job of explaining it here, but if you're not familiar with some of these terms, you can always Google those and find out how they might apply to your specific situation. So for right now, minimum version protocol SMB2 is probably fine, though if you wanted to be a bit more secure, you could bump this to 3. I'm going to leave it for 2 for right now. I'm not going to enable NetBIOS or the Wins server or any of that just for right now. Or maybe a log level would be minimum. That would be fine for most things. We'll click Save. And then again, of course, apply and save. So at this point, we've created our storage. We've created a RAID solution with our storage. We've created a file system. We've created shares. We have set up a new user account. We've enabled SMB CIFS. So now let's see if we can actually access our new home directory for the user account we just created. So what I'm going to do is we'll go back over to our desktop. We'll come over to here. We're going to drag this over, and I'm just going to come down to this 113 IP address, as that's the IP address that we saw when we first set up OpenMediaVault 8. I'm going to go ahead and go there, and hey, look, it wants some credentials from us. So I'm going to type in dbtech and put in the password that I created with that and click OK. And hey, look, so now we've got a couple of different folders here that we can use. We've got homes, we've got dbtech. So let's see if we can create a new folder. Hey, look, we're able to do that. Let's for the sake of just checking our work here, I'll bring this over. I'm going to go to grab this video file and drag it over. It's only 41 megs. But hey, look, it worked. Now we can use this device as a NAS for the user account that we have created. And of course, we can then create additional user accounts for anyone that we want to have access to our new OpenMediaVault 8 NAS. Now that's where we're going to stop today's video. We actually got quite a bit done. We installed OpenMediaVault 8 on our hardware. We set up our storage, or our drives and our storage with RAID. We set up a file system. We created home directories. We created users. We enabled file sharing and SMB CIFS, and we proved that everything up to this point is working. And that's kind of where I want to stop this video. Now, if you've got other things that you would like me to cover in upcoming videos, please be sure to leave those in the comment section down below. Again, this is the first and a half video in this upcoming OpenMediaVault 8 series. So again, if you want to kind of go through this whole process with me, be sure to get subscribed, like the video if you haven't already, that'd be great. But with that said, I'm going to wrap this up. I want to thank you guys for spending a few minutes of your day with me here today, and I'll talk to you in the next video.